joining us now to discuss Poland's president's visit to China is our guest Maciej Grabowski, director at the Center for International Studies and Development of the Jagiellonian University. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning. Thank you for your kind invitation.
So what do you think does Poland stand to gain from this visit? It does seem, even looking at the ongoing ceremony, which we have just seen on the news, but also judging by the article that was released recently by the Global Times, that the Chinese are really quite enthusiastic about President Andrzej Duda coming to China. So what do you think that Poland can actually gain out of this, given that this positive reception does invite some further developments?
That's a very good question because, of course, Poland is perceived, and that is what if you look at the Chinese social media also, some official articles like Zhenminzhibao, so People's Daily, would be important. Is perceived as part of this Western coalition that is supporting Ukraine and not necessarily following Chinese interests, of course. And we just see at this moment that Andrzej Duda was really warmly welcomed with all the honors, and this is what Chinese are well known of. They make their guests feeling exceptional. That's something that we should remember. Also, the First Lady Agata Konhauser-Duda was really appreciated in the media. At the same time, as I said, we have a problem because the visit is controversial in the sense that China is perceived as a threat to the Western world order, is perceived as an ally of Russia. And such a visit is also, or may be perceived as a challenge to American foreign policy lines. So these are the issues that we have. What can be gained out of this visit to Poland is a very difficult question because, of course, the president is focusing on possible economic gains that are also connected with his upcoming speeches at Economic Forum in Dalian in Shanghai. That's the one thing. Opening export market for Polish food, poultry, and also beef is on the table. That is a large market, and definitely, it's important to talk about it, especially having in mind this extreme deficit we have in trade with China. In theory, Andrzej Duda is declaring he would talk about the Ukrainian case. I wouldn't perceive it as a persuasive in this geopolitical issues, including Ukraine, including Belarusian cases connected with Belt and Road Initiative, etc. Maybe enough talk, but at the same time, we have to remember that it is not the most important player. We can be perceived as a gateway to the EU again in this rising competition between European Union and China, and China may propose some economic gains. I would see it probably in EV market and the further steps of talks about Isera project. So BYD or other Chinese producer probably would like to use these facilities developed in Jaworzno if they would be developed as a place where they would make a final assembling of their cars. Maybe some of them rebrand as BYD, certain model called Isera, for instance. This is what I can see as a gain, however, also a risk to both Poland and possibly also European Union, let alone, of course, just geostrategic context of relations between China and the United States.
Now, you mentioned lastly what there is to gain, especially for Poland. Now, I want to reverse that question and perhaps now let's talk about challenges. What do you think are the key challenges in fostering a balanced trade relationship between Poland and China, especially as we discussed this here on TVP World, that, China, and like you mentioned, China being one of the staunchest supporters of Russia and perceived as such by the international community, and Poland being one of the staunchest supporters of Ukraine. How do you see it?
So, starting from the last point, as I've already mentioned, I don't expect any change in terms of Chinese policy, which is, even though, of course, it's pro-Russian, it provides significant gains to China, like gaining domination in Central Asia, getting access to much cheaper carbohydrates, and basically being the country that is becoming a local power, local original power in the areas where Russia used to dominate. As I said, Central Asia would be crucial here. That's what wouldn't change most likely. I don't see at the same time China as willing to take risks. Of getting to further steps of economic sanctions. So China is also trying to keep international system working, and we have to remember that she was pretty strict during SCO Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, simply stressing the fact that Russia should not use nuclear threats. That is beneficial. That also paved the way for the support of Ukraine provided by the West, even though that necessarily was the goal of Chinese leader of Xi Jinping. But we can see it, and of course, Andrzej Duda is declaring he would show the Polish perspective to the war in the Ukraine to Xi Jinping, to Li Qiang, Chinese prime minister. But as I said, in this respect, it won't work too much. However, for China, there are many other gains to be won. Maybe if Poland would see some benefits. First, if you look at 2021 EU strategy towards China, China is now a competitor of the EU. That's also visible in German-Chinese foreign policy strategy. Though we've just seen Olaf Scholz visit to China, searching for economic gains there. We see that there's definitely important change in rhetoric, important change in policy of the EU countries, including the most important EU player, that is Germany, towards the PRC. As I said, Poland can be perceived. Andrzej Duda was also declaring he'll search for Chinese investment in Poland, may be perceived as a gateway to the EU. We have another contract to be implemented by Chinese company in terms of road construction. The previous one that was won by Kovec was a failure, which was surprising to almost everyone. But they're trying again. Chinese investment are still relatively minor in Poland, of course, comparing to other big Asian players, Korea or Japan. And I wouldn't expect there will be much change. The reason is Poland is not very attractive. What China can gain from the investments are either high technologies. We're still lagging behind Western European countries, let alone the US. So we're not very attractive in MAN, mergers and acquisitions, in this area. And Chinese money is expensive. So we can get the money much cheaper in other markets, financial markets, from the EU funds, etc. Therefore, again, I wouldn't see much opportunities for substantial growth unless there is a solution for this big problem, namely rising protectionism in Europe and rising trade war or technological war between the EU and China. Visible in the chips market, visible in electric vehicles, visible in other elements of the so-called Green Deal. in Europe, then China may offer something, because that's a strategic existential area where we could be technically a support for China. Not necessarily that would be good for our interests, but this is a different story.
So it's of course always a question of balancing different interests, and relations with China, both political and economic, form this intricate tapestry that's very difficult to analyze for the layman, but thanks to our conversation, I believe our viewers will now have a more comprehensive view of what these relations are and what options do they actually bring to the table. Maciej Grabowski was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
Thank you.